Our next speaker is Ms. Amanda Focke. Ms. Focke is the head of special collections at the Woodson Research Center, Fondren Library, and she's a certified archivist and digital archivist specialist. She's been part of the Rice community for the past 18 years, and her work involves outreach for the development of archival collections and facilitating community efforts such as oral history projects. Recently, she has spearheaded the COVID-19 Reflections archival website for Rice University through the Woodson Research Center. This project highlights personal experiences from the Rice community to serve as historical records of life during the pandemic. The title of our talk today is Creating an Archive for COVID-19 Experiences. Welcome, Ms. Focke.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me with you this afternoon. I'm excited to be here. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. I hope you can see my slide.
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. Well, so I'm coming to you from the perspective of an archivist, and as mentioned, I work in Fondren Library at the Woodson Research Center, and we have a lot of archival collections that are of interest to medical humanities students, and we've worked with a number of students over the years and faculty members, and it's really been a pleasure. And so in those projects, we've been dealing with records that are from the past, records from the yellow fever epidemic in the 19th century, other kinds of things, looking at archives of the development of the artificial heart in the 20th century. And we know that people in the 21st century and beyond are going to be interested in this pandemic experience of COVID-19. So right now we're collecting materials that are for us right now, and also for what I like to call future us. And so I'm going to get started. So what we're going to do is look a little bit at some of the why we're collecting these experiences or evidence of these experiences, and the what, sort of what are we doing, and a little bit about how we're doing it. And I'm sharing a little bit of these experiences with you as we go along here. What you're looking at here is an anonymous submission to the COVID-19 reflection site that we created here at Rice, and just had an open invitation for contributions to. And this one's called Panic to Peace. And as you see from the caption, it's a word graphic contrasting the chaos of COVID-19 with the inner peace that the artist experiences also with it. So, you know, as we know from our own experiences, there's a lot of value in preserving personal perceptions and experiences, capturing the emotional, psychological, and human toll of the pandemic. We have a deep human need to reflect. We need to understand our own experiences, and we want to understand the experiences of other people. And in order to do those things, we need to have a record of those experiences somewhere that's accessible to us for the long term. And that's where the archives comes in. So why collecting these experiences? That is why. It's very important to do. It helps us understand ourselves and reflect and make plans for the future. Here is a quote from one of the written submissions that came from our website. As I transition to my life after Rice following this semester, this was written in the fall, the responsibility of serving my community has come to the forefront of my mind, especially in the wake of the pandemic. The entire experience has shaped my environment and ignited the need for me to reevaluate my idea of living meaningfully. So there are a lot of projects out there that are looking at COVID-19 and serving as archives. So this is one that's an example. It's at the national level. It has an open call for submissions for people to submit stories. And so this is a wonderful source for stories from all over, from all kinds of different perspectives. And this is one that's just talking about the fact that a lot of these projects are started in libraries and archives. And that's because we're a natural place to collect materials of all kinds, especially archival materials. And many of the projects are at the state level, at the city level, and sometimes they're at the university level. And then other times these projects are, they might be student-led, not led by the library or an archive. You know, they crop up everywhere, which is wonderful. So this is an example from the Rice Raw Photography, and they had a photography competition about the pandemic. So that's just one example of, there's places all over where people are sharing their experience of the pandemic. So at whatever scale or scope, these projects are very important. This image, if you're familiar with campus, I'm sure you are, you know where this was taken. This is right behind the library, where all the seating from the Brockstein Pavilion was pulled together and fastened together to a tree so that nobody could sit there. It looks different now. This is an image that was from April 2020. And so it's a slice of life. It's a day on campus showing how the campus was responding to the pandemic. This is the kind of picture that might evoke an emotional response for people. I could see this being a writing prompt, a source for creative writing, a journal prompt. There's lots of different ways that images like this could be used. This is an image that was taken by Melissa Kane, who is, she's retired now, but she was the university historian at the time. And this is from our local website as well. So what have we done with the collecting at Rice? There are a variety of things that we have done, and I'm going to show you some about all of these things here. Starting with the most straightforward, which is a web capture of Rice's key crisis webpage, which is coronavirus.rice.edu. And then we have the site that I was just showing you some imagery from, the Rice-focused online archive based at the library. And then there's a student-led oral history program that's just getting underway that's based at the Humanities Research Center. And then I also want to talk about some focused oral histories in the Houston Asian American Archive and the Chow Center for Asian Studies in partnership with Fondren Library. So Rice has a COVID dashboard site, and the library has a subscription with a service called Archive It, where we have a very regular capture of that site, the coronavirus.rice.edu, so that if you go to the Wayback Machine and put in that URL, as you see in this image here, you would be able to see all the different times that it has been captured. So we started capturing it on March 26th, 2020, and it only shows the captures through January 28th of 2021, but that's because on the public side, it has a little bit of a time lag for what it shows. But you can see, like, any of these blue dots on the calendar down here are days when it was captured, and you can click on those and see what that page looked like at the time. I imagine that you have probably seen that site, but in case you haven't, it's the site where you can see a dashboard of data about the positivity rate on campus, how many tests have been given over time, and what were the results. It gives information about how the testing is being done on campus. It has news alerts and announcements about changes in policy. And so it has a lot of key information about how the university has responded to the pandemic, which anybody wanting to look back at Rice's experience of the pandemic would want to look at this material. This is a screen capture, as you see from the green circle up there at the right, from March 26th, 2020, when we first started capturing the site. And you can see what the news alert is from then, basically talking about, you know, where people might be at that time and that classes are shifting to remote format. It was very early days in the pandemic. And so it is definitely quite a lens of what was happening on campus. And it's something that you could use with other sources to talk about what life was like on campus at this time. And then this is a screenshot of the COVID-19 Reflections website that we have that's based at the library and archive. And in my department, but it's a very interdepartmental and now cross-campus effort. You can see that it's possible to click over on the left. You see the navigation options. You can click to contribute an item. So you can just go right there and either anonymously or not contribute an item that might be a story, narrative, or it might be images. You can find information about the project, which includes some terms and conditions for participation in the project, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Or I can just talk about it now, mainly to say that in order to set this site up and invite public contributions of narratives and images, and later to contribute full oral histories to it, we did go through the Institutional Review Board process, the IRB process, on campus to get approval in case any of this touches on human subjects research. So the terms and conditions relate to that IRB process to try to keep the humans safe and respectful in going through this process. You can click to browse items in the archive. We have images, we have narratives, we have some audio, and we're hoping to have more as time goes on. We have a little bit of mapping there, which is really just like linking out to other people's dashboard and mapping activities. And then in 2021, we're going to be adding some oral history interviews, which I'm excited to tell you about. The narratives that are on this site, some of them are just spontaneous submissions from people. This is focused on the Rice community, and some of them are narratives that were written by students who were guided by faculty in class who were doing this for the purpose of sharing these journal entries publicly. And so we have, you know, consent to share these online. There are some concerns with doing these kinds of, with sharing information like this, you know, where we want to be careful that, for example, someone talking about someone else who has the illness, who has COVID, you know, maybe that person doesn't want people talking about them having COVID, you know, there are some nuances of appropriateness and privacy that have to be respected as we go. And this is to tell you that there is this student-led COVID-19 interview program that's going to be starting in this semester here in spring 2021, based at the Humanities Research Center. It's led by a student, Hannah Tobin of Martell, class of 2021. and Dr. Melissa Balar in the Humanities Research Center, and I'm helping them on the archives side of things. And we have, Hannah has developed a participation interest form, which I'm going to show next. And I've made a handy shortened bit.ly web address. If you want to note that, you can go and log your interest in participating in this project if you would like to. We would be delighted to have your participation in it. And the interviews would be going into the archive at Rice and be part of the COVID-19 reflections site that I was showing you earlier. And that same bit.ly address is up there. This is just the rest of the participation form. It invites you to submit a written reflection or participate in an interview. And we have an oral history consent form link down at the bottom of the form. So we're hoping that there'll really be a lot of people in the spring interested in participating in this and archiving their reflections. And this is to show that the Houston Asian American Archive, when the acronym is HAAA there, HA, I like to say, are conducting some specific COVID-19 interviews. They have a very robust oral history program that's been going on for about 10 years now. And they have recently started doing a focused group on COVID-19 of interviews that it might be previous interviewees, it might be new people, new suggestions of people who want to participate, people who volunteer themselves to be interviewed. I gave you the link there in red for how you can find those interviews. It's in Rice's institutional repository there at scholarship.rice.edu. And for those interviews, there are full transcripts, there's audio and video both usually. The interviewees get a chance to review and approve their interviews, and so that's a nice chance in case anybody has second thoughts about something that they shared. Generally, I don't think people have things to correct from that. And this window that you see on the right here is a way that we're able to present these oral histories where you can toggle between a transcript view, if you look down at the lower right, and the index view. So a little index is what you're looking at here, and you can click on any of those sort of little mini chapter headings and jump to that part of the recorded interview. So we feel like it's a very accessible way for people to get to the interviews. You can keyword search them. So that's a great format. And just to say also that the wonderful people over at the Chow Center, including Ann Shee, who has been leading the program for the oral histories, and she's been working really hard on creating really wonderful exhibits in the library that have focused on COVID, really, and sort of the experience, as she described it, of feeling like there's some anti-Asian sentiment about the COVID-19, about the pandemic. So these exhibits are a response to that. And the one that you're looking at here on the screen is a site-specific installation by our Rice alum, Rachel Gonzalez, who's a Filipina American. And it's a mix of painting and poetry if you look at it up close, and it's meant to show sort of the curve of COVID rising and falling. And it's meant to be kind of an immersive experience to walk through it. And they recently had a member of the Filipino American community who knows the artist come in and do a solo dance performance in it that was recorded. And should be available later this month online. So we have that to look forward to. And I'm really excited about that. It's just another part of the healing that can happen through focused self-expression and taking time to try to understand that kind of work done by others. So what are some of the challenges with this kind of work, the archiving? I like this slide here that's showing an article that's online from the Smithsonian Magazine about what can we learn from 1918 influenza diaries. Well, it's easier to learn from those in some ways because lots of times in those days, people would write diaries, people would write letters to family, and those would wind up tied up with ribbon and put in a cedar chest for safekeeping, and they would be there for decades. We have lots of ways that we express ourselves now that don't really lend themselves to tying up with ribbon and putting it in a cedar chest, you know. Zoom calls, Zoom meetings, social media, texting, all these kinds of things don't really lend themselves to that, but that's so central to the way a lot of, you know, how we share with each other how we're doing and what is going on. So it is challenging to develop an archive about the pandemic, given all of those private kinds of communications. But there are ways that we can get at it. You know, these open calls for communications, the invitations for oral histories. Certainly there are news stories. It can be hard to get people to share outside of their comfort zone of trusted family and friends and colleagues. That is a challenge. There's also the challenge of the fact that the people who are running these projects are themselves also experiencing the pandemic, both personally and professionally. That brings all kinds of challenges. So yes, lots and lots of challenges as we discussed. But I just want to close by saying that nothing is perfect, of course. So we do what we can. Here are some Rice students doing what they can. Nothing's perfect. This was O Week, orientation week, trying to welcome new people to campus. It doesn't look like it would normally look. Everybody's got masks on and they're standing apart from each other. It looks very different, but it still looks very welcoming. And this is a photo by one of the campus photographers, Jeff Fitlow. So this is the kind of thing that will be preserved in the archive. And we're thankful for that. Public Affairs has done a great job of capturing lots of photos and images. So I would say that for archiving, you know, we have a lot more work that we can do to collect more. But we're trying to not be intimidated by how much work needs to be done and not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Just sort of doing our best and accepting that that's different on different days. That's something that we all have to be doing during this time. So thank you. And I invite you to come and do research in the archives. And we are open. The library is open. Our reading room is open in the Special Collections Department, the Woodson Research Center. And so we welcome you there and hope to see you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Focke. Your work at the Woodson Research Center for the past 18 years has had a significant impact in the Houston community. So thank you so much for preserving and providing access to like our shared history through your archival efforts.